scheme of what makes up a video game, our topic today is pretty far down the list. It's not the mechanics, the story, or even the characters. It's just the humble title card drop. Then again, a really cool title card drop can stick with you and really set the tone for the game to come, especially if it lives up to that initial impression. We've collected a bunch of truly epic title appearances in video games that impressed us not only in the moment, but had us settling in a little further on our couches, keen for the rest of the game to come. Be sure to let us know your favorites if we missed any great ones down in that comment box, but for now, let's take a trip down memory lane to revisit some phenomenal title screens. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 epic title card drops in video games. Number 10, Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption and its sequel Red Dead Redemption 2, which is technically a prequel, are both epic video game masterpieces that are punctuated by some incredible title cards. And by punctuated, we really mean punctuated, because the title card for Red Dead Redemption comes at the very end of the game. Spoilers for this 13-year-old game are incoming, so go ahead and meet us at number 9 if you don't want to hear how it ends. After a rollicking tens of hours spent fighting the law and for the law as John Marston, the game wraps up with our hero returning home to his family, and it seems like all is well, for like a minute. Then in a final brutal twist, we're betrayed, and though John puts up a valiant final stand, he's ultimately brought down. Flash forward and we're in the shoes of John's son Jack, who's vowed to avenge his father. Of course, he pulls it off and sends the man responsible for his father's death to a grisly end, avenging his family, but becoming the very thing his parents had never wanted him to be, an outlaw. It's at this moment the Red Dead Redemption logo pops up, all in its red, white, and black stylized glory, and it's a perfect moment. Number 9, Until Dawn. Supermassive cinematic horror masterpiece Until Dawn is a game that really should have an epic title card drop, and not to worry, it's on this list, so you can be assured it definitely does. The game kicks off with a group of teenagers getting cozy at their ominous cabin in the woods. Of course, teenagers are mean, so right off the bat, the majority of them turn on Hannah to pull a cruel trick where they get her to believe Mike is interested in her. The prank goes about as well as you'd expect. Hannah runs outside, pursued by her sister Beth. The game introduces you to its decision-making mechanics and quick-time events, but no matter what you do, the girls end up tumbling off a precipice to their brutal respective deaths. One short aside with the menacing narrator Dr. Hill later, where you're asked what you find frightening and why, and now it's title card time. The drop kicks off with the fantastic tone-setting track Oh Death, as sung by Amy Van Rokel. The title fades in and out of view right before the melody becomes more menacing, with plenty of foreshadowing creepy imagery. The title sequence is really a masterwork in and of itself, queuing up the fantastic game to come. Number 8, Ghost of Tsushima. Now, a game doesn't have to have a late title card to make it an epic title card, but we'd be lying if we said it doesn't kinda help if it's paced correctly. Sucker Punch Studios' 2020 action-adventure Ghost of Tsushima has so much going for it that makes it well worth your time, and its phenomenal title card drop is a perfect signposting for this. The game kicks off with protagonist Jin in the middle of a set of samurai soldiers preparing to take on an army of Mongol warriors. It's a losing battle, but he charges into it alongside his uncle Lord Shimura anyway. The odds are unbeatable, but you fight on until you're skewered by multiple arrows and nursed back from the brink of death by Yuna, a thief who lets you know that while you were out, the Mongols romped across most of the island of Tsushima. Jin attempts to rescue Lord Shimura from Castle Kanata and decides to take the honorable approach, heading in through the front door. This proves to be a wild mistake as our hero comes face to face with Koto Khan and is thrown off a bridge. This is where your journey seems to end, but rather, it's all set to begin. After coming back from the brink of death yet again and playing through a flashback to our hero's roots, Jin reunites with Yuna and vows to liberate the island from the Mongols. You ride off into the gorgeous game world as the game's stunning score surges behind you and the playable cinematic drops the game name and the first act. It's frankly a perfect title drop for a beautiful game, and you're only an hour into the journey. Number 7, Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed is another franchise that's pretty synonymous with the idea of epic, so it only makes sense that we'd see one of its titles here, and we've gone with Assassin's Creed 2. After we get through the very unique and very weird Ezio as a baby tutorial where we learn to move our tiny baby legs and arms and hang out with Desmond and Kristen Bell in the present day for a little while, we finally step into the fashionable shoes of grown-up Ezio Auditore. Your brother Federico challenges you to a race climbing across the rooftops to the top of a church, at which point the game's iconic score surges and the two brothers look out over the city below as the game titles appear beside them. The story, the relationship between Ezio and his family, the parkour gameplay, and the excellent soundtrack all coalesce at this moment that perfectly sets up what many argue is a pretty darn perfect game. Number 6, The Last of Us. While there isn't a lot to be said about the intro to The Last of Us that you wouldn't have heard before, let's give you the lowdown in case you've been living under a rock. Living under a rock, of course, being that warm, comfortable feeling of someone who gets to live their lives not knowing the start of The Last of Us. So if that's you, sorry I'm about to take that happy feeling away from you. The game starts off with Joel's daughter Sarah giving him a watch for his birthday late in the evening. She awakes again in the middle of the night, and you control her as she wanders around the house looking for Joel after receiving a panicked call from his brother Tommy. Lo and behold, it's the zombie apocalypse outside and everything's gone sideways. Sarah finds Joel in his study right before a zombified neighbor bursts through the glass door. The two of you and Tommy climb into his truck and you watch from the back seat as things get more and more tense. A handful of terrifying close calls and a car accident later, and the trio are forced to take to the streets. Now, controlling Joel, you do your best to redirect through the hordes of the undead and panicked civilians while carrying Sarah. Eventually, you're saved from a sea of baddies by a soldier who's a whole other kind of baddie, and he shoots at both Joel and Sarah. Though Joel is saved, Sarah isn't so lucky, and one of the most heart-wrenching scenes in video game history ensues. Just as Sarah passes away as Joel is begging her to be alright, everything cuts to black and The Last of Us appears on the screen as its logo. It's a basically perfect moment that sets up a beautiful yet totally misery-ridden game to come. Number 5, NieR Automata Route C. There are a few late title screens we're highlighting on this list, but one that takes the entirety of 2 games to reach is probably the latest one of all. To reach the opening credits and title screen for NieR Automata Route C, you need to play through the game twice, and then you're kicked into the next major plot point in a story that, don't worry, I absolutely wouldn't spoil for you here. For those heavily invested in this one, especially those who sat through all of the repetition that takes place in Route B, getting to Route C and noticing that the game has really only just begun is a jaw-dropping moment. The soundtrack is properly stunning, your connection to the characters at this point is fully cemented, and the true opening, which still takes an hour to get to after you played the game twice, had fans awestruck. The title drop itself appears in total silence after, well, to put it without spoilers, shit absolutely hits the fan, and then you embody A2 and 9S. Even if it's not everybody's cup of tea, the complexity and ambition of NieR Automata end to end has to be admired, and it's absolutely epic, title card included. Number 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake easily could have been a game that simply couldn't deliver on its ridiculous levels of pre-release hype. Lauded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, there was so much to live up to and so much that could have gone wrong. Though some fans did complain of pointless padding throughout the first half of the adventure, there's very little to complain about with the game's opening credits and title card drop. While loads of Final Fantasy games could have taken this slot, the joy of seeing the sheer scale of Midgar and the incredible level of detail and all the music behind it is really hard to beat. All of this unfolds with flawless camera direction to the tune of the game's truly epic soundtrack, and clever choices like the layering of Sephiroth's theme and Aerith's theme are fascinating in their symbolism and foreshadowing. The entire opening is a cinematic masterwork that culminates with the camera panning out on the entirety of Midgar, and the orchestral score coming to a head as the logo flashes across the screen. Without all my colourful language, it is, in a word, sick. Number 3, Doom 2016. Both Doom from 2016 and Doom Eternal could be right at home on this list, but we're gonna give it to the game that brought this one back from the dead in unbelievable style. The game begins by throwing you into the lion's den, or demon's den as it were, and you're instructed to get your rip and tear on. You suit up in your trusty armor and set off to fix up a satellite. Delightfully, right as you're being told by a Dr. Samuel Hayden over a comm that he'd like to work with you to address the invasion, you tear the console right out of the ground and throw it across the room. A stack of wonderfully gory kills in a locked down room later, alongside Doom's euphoric thumping soundtrack, you see a hologram saying you cannot be allowed to leave the facility. You receive an ominous second message from Hayden as you take the elevator out, the heavy metal score soars as you smash a second console, the title screen drops, and the music concludes with a perfectly timed reload. It's very epic, it's very Doom, and it's the perfect setup for the impending demon-killing action. Number 2, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Right alongside plenty of other series on this list, The Legend of Zelda has a healthy handful of epic title card drops, mostly because they're well-directed and cinematic moments in their own right, but also because knowing an entire Zelda game lies ahead of you is never a bad thing. Breath of the Wild had a monumental amount of hype that it needed to live up to, but it seemed like it might actually be able to do it. And by the time you see that title screen, there's not a doubt in your mind. At the very beginning of the game, Link awakens in a dark, mysterious chamber, having been called upon by Zelda. He gets his hands on a Sheikah Slate, the very latest in totally not Nintendo Switch technology, and the chamber door opens. At this point, you hustle your little butt out to get your first glimpse of Hyrule. The camera pans back across the expanse of the Great Plateau, and as you look all the way across to Death Mountain, a relatively understated logo appears in the lower right corner. Because, why would you want to interrupt that view? Number 1, Prey, 2017. The excellence of Arcane's 2017 action-adventure Prey really falls into the category of if you know, you know. Those who played it and adore it can tell you it's completely underrated, and those who haven't are sorely missing out. Which is probably why those who played it will know exactly why it's made its way onto this list, while those who haven't may be wondering what all the fuss is about. For the uninitiated, Prey kicks off with protagonist Morgan being awoken in their gorgeous apartment and informed by your brother that a helicopter is on its way to pick you up for your first day working as part of the TranStar research team. Futuristic, dreamy cyberpunk tunes kick in once you climb inside the helicopter, and you quickly notice the text Bethesda Softworks Presents is visible outside the window, while an Arcane Studios production, and finally Prey, are also written out in sky-high letters positioned across the buildings and cityscape. This one honestly isn't overly complicated, nor is it a late title screen. It's just really impressive in its symbolism and presentation. The text Prey disappears once you enter the facility, which is important as nothing is what it appears at the beginning of the game. A fact that becomes apparent very quickly as you proceed through the early testing chambers and reawaken back at your apartment from the start of the game, but with a significant twist. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other epic title card drops in video games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're liking, come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.